Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge and the next episode in our Days of Decision World in Flames combined campaign playthrough. Now we've reached the May-June 1938 turn, and last turn, March-April, saw the biggest developments yet in the game. The Commonwealth finally joined the rest of Europe in gearing up for war production, but it was the fascist powers that made the biggest splash. Germany has taken the first step beyond the borders of Germany proper in her quest for European, perhaps even world hegemony, by absorbing Austria via the Anschluss. Now, this is significant in a couple of ways. First, it's the first objective city that has been gained by a major power that they did not start the game with. So while Germany and the fascists as an ideology still have a long way to go to hit those victory totals, this is the first step, if you will, along that path. Also, Germany did manage to gain another factory and an oil resource, both of which will come in very handy over the ensuing course of the game. Now, not to be outdone in Europe by the Germans, the Japanese decided to begin their conquest of an empire in Asia by declaring war on the Chinese using the Peking Bridge incident as the spark to ignite that war. Their attack began very successfully, but a bit slowly. The weather certainly hampered things, and I'm not quite sure if the Japanese were as prepared for the beginning of this war as they could have been. But with the reserves on both sides now called out and fully ready for action, we're moving into the summer months. These should be a couple of long turns over May, June, and July, August, and I think this will prove to be the hottest summer yet for the game. So with plenty of action from a civil war in Spain to a war in China, let's go ahead and jump right in and see what developments are going to occur in this turn's political phase. As always, first thing we need to do is determine the political initiative for the upcoming political phase. And to put some of the bidding in context, I'll just give you a brief recap of the money that each of the major powers has on hand. And I would tell you this is probably the lowest total that we've seen combined yet in the game, which means war must be getting close. Italy, believe it or not, is the richest nation right now with a grand total of 1 lira on hand. That's right, we have a single major power of the 8 that actually has any positive balance in their bank accounts right now. The United States, China, Japan, and Germany all sit at 0, while France is at -2 and the Commonwealth and Soviet Union are both at -3. So given the real lack of funds currently available right now, I wouldn't have expected much at all, if anything, in the way of political activity this phase. But despite that, we do have 3 powers that actually did place bids: Germany, Italy, and France. Each of those major powers bid 1 each, again trying to minimize their outlay in order to get an opportunity to do some kind of political activity this turn. Of those 3 powers, Italy, which bid 1, gets +2 for her initiative position from last turn, but because the political phase ended before she could do her option last turn, she also receives 3 bonus bid points. That's going to give her a total of 6, and that is going to be good enough to move the Italians all the way up to first place. The Germans bid 1, and they will get a +3 for their second position last turn for a total of 4. That is good enough to keep them in the second position this turn. And then finally, the French bid 1, and they're going to get a +1 for their position last turn for a total of 2, which is good enough to move them all the way up to the third position, given that the other 5 powers are not bidding. Now, among the non-bidding powers, we have the USSR sitting here with a +4, which is going to drop them to 4th, followed by the Commonwealth with a +3. Japan has a +2. China 0 +1. She also gets an additional +1 because she too was trying to conduct an option last turn. So she gets a single bonus bid point for a total of 2, which actually matches Japan, but you can see the Japanese political effectiveness is much higher than the Chinese, so the Japanese win that tie and fall to 6th. Now, the reason China bid last turn but is not bidding this turn is that what China was trying to do last turn was to select her option to gear up her production. However, the Japanese Peking Bridge incident and declaration of limited war against them did that for China. So now there's no reason for China to spend any money to do that. They got a free gear up out of it. So with nothing pressing and really no cash on hand, China is going to just going to pass on bidding this time and slide into the 7th position. And of course, the United States bidding 0 plus 0 is going to remain in 8th position. So we have the initiative order set, and we only have 3 bidding powers this turn. Should be a relatively short political phase. We'll see what's going to unfold here. We're actually going to start with the Italians, which is a little bit of a different experience for us. Italy's biggest weakness right now is her production. She only has 5 resources that she is bringing into the country. She has 11 factories, so there's a lot of unused production capacity, and she needs to rectify that. The problem is she's not strong enough to go take those resources militarily, so she's going to fall back on the diplomatic method, and she's going to sign a minor economic agreement, and she's going to sign that agreement with Yugoslavia, which makes, I think, some sense since Yugoslavia is directly east of Italy. It's close. It's easy to rail the resources into the country. She doesn't have to worry about going to war and having any of her enemies cutting overseas convoy pipelines, anything like that. So Yugoslavia does have 2 regular resources available, and the option will allow the Italians to grab one or both of them, and they are going to go ahead and sign the agreement for both resources. So that will tie up all of the resources that Yugoslavia has. This is going to cost 4 money, which the Italians will hopefully get back via increased production here over the next few turns. That's going to drop them down to a current on-hand total of -4 as far as money goes. The U.S. entry, you can see, is 0 here, and the only thing that'll happen is Yugoslavia will pick up a +1 Italian influence for the signing of the economic agreement. I'll go ahead and place the influence marker over in Yugoslavia. At that point, Italy will then have to choose a minor country to activate. So we'll look at that over on the map. Now, the Italians have been eyeing these 2 resources in Yugoslavia for quite some time. The problem was their production multiple was so low that I think it was 1/3 at the start of the game, that they wouldn't have helped that much. But now that she's bumped it up to 1/2, by bringing in these 2 resources, that actually is going to result in a 1 build point increase to her production every turn moving forward. And then as she gears up yet again in the future, she'll get even more out of those resources. Now, as far as activating a minor country, she really doesn't have very many good options at all, because she's not terribly popular among any of the minor countries. Matter of fact, this +1 you see here in Yugoslavia is actually the 2nd best influence she has in any of the minor countries. She does have +2 over here in Portugal, and has given some thought to activating Portugal. The problem is Japan is sitting at -2 right now, which will basically undo whatever good this +2 Italian influence does. So she's hoping that the Japanese will be able to gain a little more positive influence there in the Netherlands, which will allow her influence then in turn to actually be more effective. I think instead what Italy may look to do is activate the Netherlands up here. There's, again, no actual Italian influence currently in the country, but the only requirement when activating a minor country is that it is a minor country that the major power can control. And Italy, like Japan, China, and the United States, is limited in which minor countries she can control, but Netherlands is on that list. And one of the reasons she is going after Netherlands is you see the Commonwealth is sitting with a -4 and France has a -2. So it's not going to be so much a matter of pulling the Netherlands towards Italy and the fascists so much as maybe driving the Netherlands away from the Democrats. So let's go ahead and activate the Netherlands. We'll head over to the status display and see how this ends up affecting the location of the Dutch marker. On the status display, you can see the Netherlands is still located here in the center of the neutral zone. We have our 5 control markers that are in the Netherlands currently. And now it's just time to resolve this. We do have -1 for Germany, which will not move the marker at all. And we have a +1 for the Soviets, which will also not move the marker at all. And now we've got a -3, -4, and -2. I think what we'll do is we'll activate the let's activate the French -2 here, which will move the marker 1 hex, if I can grab it, 1 hex away from France, which is located up at the top of the screen. You can see here, so that's going to move them into the hex with Chile, and that will take care of that marker. Now we've got a -3 to Japan, and we have a -4 for the Commonwealth. I think we'll do the -4 for the Commonwealth next. Commonwealth located here. That's going to drive the Netherlands to 4 here, and then finally, unfortunately, that -3 from the Japanese is going to push the Netherlands 1 hex that way. So a bit of movement there on the part of the Netherlands. I think they're a little bit closer to the communist ideology than the fascist, and certainly more so than the Italians would like. But given their other options, I think that was probably the best move for them. Now, the only thing that remains to be seen is whether or not the Italians end the political phase, and they will require a 1 on the die roll to do so. And a 4 means it will continue, and next up is Germany. Germany bid this turn primarily to keep herself at the front of the line as far as political initiative goes. Germany just hates giving up those nice +4 and +3 bid modifiers for the low initiative positions. But with nothing really critical to do, she's going to take this opportunity to do what heretofore has been a rather rare instance of cooperation amongst the fascist powers. Germany is going to select option 16, German advisors recalled. This refers to the German military mission that was sent to China, I believe, late 20s, early 30s certainly, to advise the Nationalist Army on reforming their military. Well, you can see the prerequisites here is a major power is at war with China, and that is fulfilled with the Japanese declaration of war last turn. The cost for this initiative is 2 money, and that is going to drop Germany to a total right now of -3 after spending 1 on her bid. And you can see there aren't too many minor countries that this is going to affect very heavily, and a pretty small U.S. entry hit. Now, what does this do? What the recall of the German advisors is going to do is the nationalist Chinese now fight using attack weakness, and they must destroy 1 on-map infantry corps. For those of you that play just standard War and Flames, you're familiar with the rule where the Chinese nationalist units can defend at full strength, but whenever they make an attack, they have to attack at half strength. Well, in Days of Decision, the default setting for the Chinese does not have that attack weakness in effect. In order to saddle the Chinese with that penalty, this is the option that needs to be chosen by Germany of all major powers. And again, reflects nicely the withdrawal of the German military mission that was there historically, and now Japan will hopefully have a little bit easier time with China. At least they certainly don't have to worry as much about potential Chinese counterattacks. And at the moment right now, we can't overlook the fact that the Chinese are going to have to remove one of their on-map infantry corps. They don't have that many on-map to begin with, so this could be a really nice boost to the Japanese offensive that has just gotten underway. So what I'll do is we've paid for it. I'll go ahead and record the U.S. entry. I'll place the German control markers in the respective countries, and then Germany will have to activate a minor country. So we'll do that on map, as well as revealing which infantry corps the Chinese are going to remove. Well, minor country reaction to the recall of the German advisors was fairly muted. Only 6 minor countries had any opinion on it whatsoever. Germany was able to pick up +1 influence in both Bulgaria and Hungary, which offset the -1 that she had previously had there. The Netherlands seems to dislike pretty much everything that Germany is doing these days, so Germany got -1 there. But Portugal and Siam both Germany picked up +1 on both of those, and then Spain went the other way with a -1. So Germany's influence in Spain right now is -2. The Republican government obviously not terribly pleased with fascists of any stripe at this point in time. Now, as far as a minor country to activate, Germany doesn't have a lot of positive influence in really any of the minor countries out there right now. It's been kind of a running theme here of late. So I think the best option for Germany at this point might be to activate Turkey over here. While she only has a +1 positive influence there, both the Commonwealth and the USSR are sitting at -3. So again, it may not be a case of activating Turkey and drawing her towards herself so much as activating Turkey and having her being driven away from the Soviets and the Commonwealth. So we'll go ahead and activate Turkey, and then we also need to, I'll go ahead and collect the control markers here. But before we head over to the status display, we're going to need to remove a Chinese infantry corps. And this, there's not a lot of options for the Chinese to choose from. And keep in mind that it did specify an infantry corps, so that rules out removing any garrisons or militia or warlords or any Chinese communists. So when it comes to nationalist infantry corps, we have, or technically armies, we have the 17th Army here, we have the 14th Army here, and I think those are the only 2 on-map infantry corps right now. So it's going to be a question of whether the Chinese are going to weaken their southern defenses or their northern defenses. Given that the vast majority of the Japanese invaders right now are located in the north, they are really tempted to remove the 14th Army here in the south, although it's going to make it much more difficult to contain any Japanese expansion of the bridgehead here at Futiao. But it's also the stronger corps as opposed to our 17th Army in the north. So I think we will. I think we'll go ahead and remove this one. That means we can head over to the status display and resolve the control markers. We can see that Turkey is located here at the center of the neutral zone. I don't believe Turkey has been activated yet, or at least not activated with any influence enough to move the marker. We do have our 5 control markers here. Of them, we've got 3 that are 1s, which will not result in any change. So we can resolve the German +1, the Italian -1, and the French -1. That's going to leave us with the Commonwealth -3 and the Soviet -3. Again, I don't think either one is it's going to matter the order in which we resolve them. So let's go ahead and resolve the Soviet -3 first. So it's going to push Turkey 1 hex this way, with one of those influence going to waste, and then we'll resolve the Commonwealth, which will push it 1 hex this way, it'll end up there with Chile. So not a huge movement on the part of Turkey, but as you can see, we're getting more and more minor countries scattered about the neutral zone here. There seems to be a fairly sizable cluster inching their way towards the fascists, but again, we've got a few here that are leaning towards the Democrats at this point in time. Now, with that all done, the only thing left to do is to see if Germany is going to end the political phase, and the Italians have done one political option prior to this, which means we'll have a -1 to this die roll. And a 4, -1 is a 3, that's greater than 1, which means the phase will continue, and it is now France's opportunity to play a political option. Well, the French option this turn is going to be a bit anticlimactic. They're going to take this opportunity to select French option 0C, hold an election, and that's going to satisfy their annual requirement for an election for 1938. What this is going to do is sort of get that out of the way for the next 3 turns at least, because there is a danger in France, or really any of the democracies that are not yet at war, being saddled with having to hold an election during a critical political phase. And we haven't really talked about this too much, but there are a few political options, particularly with Germany, that when the fascists play that option, the option can be thwarted if the Commonwealth and France manage to play certain reactionary options later in that same political phase. But if the fascists time it properly, they can set it up where if one or the other of the democracies owes an election, they can play IPO 10, requiring that democracy to hold an election in that political phase, or not be able to do anything else until they hold an election in the next political phase. So you can get a situation where maybe Japan or Italy goes real early in the political phase, plays IPO 10 on, say, France, requiring her to hold an election. Then Germany immediately follows that up with something like demanding the Sudetenland or the Polish court or something like that. And the Western allies, the Democrats, will be unable to prevent that German option's effects from going into place, because France will no longer be able to meet the requirements to prevent that from happening, because she can't play the proper option. She's stuck being forced to play the hold an election option. And this is Days of Decision's way of sort of modeling the historical occurrences where oftentimes a French government would fall and be in disarray. They would have no cabinet or no government, and it was at those times when Hitler chose to make some of his more provocative moves, like occupying the Rhineland, for instance. So with France getting the annual election out of the way now, that removes the danger of her not being able to react properly if something were to happen later in 1938. And again, you start to get the sense that things are beginning to move now on the international scene, and we can anticipate more and more activity as we get closer and closer to the outbreak of a quote general war. Now there is no, and I hate to use that term general war, because there's no technical general war in Days of Decision 3. There was in Days of Decision 1, where you would play Days of Decision up until the point where general war breaks out through the play of various options. And that would generally mean that Germany was at war with either the Commonwealth, France, and or the USSR. And then Days of Decision would basically go away. You'd transition out of that, and then you would be right on to just a straight standard World in Flames game, just with a different starting point. But with Days of Decision 2 and Days of Decision 3, that's no longer the case. So there is no general war where we're going to transition out of Days of Decision. I still use the term basically to refer to the European fascists being at war with one or more of the democracies. And so I think we are starting to see that that get closer and closer. I don't know that it's necessarily imminent, just from the simple fact that I think Germany is still a little bit too weak militarily to really tempt or risk an outbreak of war just now. So we shall see. But with that, France is going to have to activate a minor country. So we will head over to the map for that. You can see this has zero cost. It has no minor country effects and 0 U.S. entry. So a pretty vanilla option, except for the fact that we will activate a minor country, which could have some implications over on the status display. So let's head over to the maps now and take a look at that. France is going to activate Belgium here. Now, it's not necessarily a great choice for her. There aren't very many actually right now. With so many political options being played over the last few turns, we've had a lot of minor countries activated, which has sort of emptied out a lot of the influence from all the major powers that have been built up in those particular minor countries. And so most major powers are sort of starting from scratch. But what we have here, France actually has -2 influence in Belgium, but more importantly, Germany is sitting at -4. So France wants to use this opportunity to get rid of this -2 influence in Belgium, and they'll be able to use this -4 German influence to sort of offset that. And then, of course, the Commonwealth also has a -1, which really won't be affecting things much. So this is more of an opportunity for France to be able to draw Belgium closer to her, even though she still has negative influence in there. And then hopefully the Belgians will see the light and decide that a closer relationship with France and the democracies is in their best interest, rather than trying to pull away. So we'll pick up these 3 control markers and we will head over to the status display to see where Belgium ends up. We see Belgium is located right here within the Democrat ideology, the Social Democrat faction, just kind of on the very edge here. And France would certainly like to ensure that Belgium stays in the Democrat ideology. Our 3 control markers are located here, and this time I think, again, we'll see how the order of resolution works out. So I think there could be a bit of an impact depending upon which way we do this. I do think, though, first the -1 for the Commonwealth, we'll resolve that first. There's Commonwealth here. It would cost 2 to move the marker, but then they're crossing a boundary, which would add an additional cost to that. So it actually cost 3 to get Belgium into any of these hexes. So we basically can just kind of blow off the -1 for the Commonwealth. Now we have a -2 French and a -4 for Germany. If we were to do the -2 for France first, that's going to want to push Belgium into this hex. Well, again, it's going to be 2 to move here, and then it's going to be an extra 1 to move across the boundary for a total cost of 3. So this -2 influence is not quite enough to actually move the marker in this case. Now, with that out of the way, the last thing we have remaining is the -4 for Germany. Germany down here, that's going to push Belgium this way, and it would only cost 2 to go here, and Belgium can't get across the boundary here because that would be 3, just like they couldn't go here for 3, but they can slide 1 more here for a total of -4, and that's going to move Belgium considerably closer to France. So even though the French had -2 influence in the minor country, the fact that Germany had -4 and the order in which the markers were resolved, and the Belgian marker's location here sitting on a boundary to cross made a fairly substantial difference, and was able to, like I said, get Belgium immediately adjacent to France. It won't take much more to get Belgium actually into France's hex here, allowing her to, again, to potentially align Belgium if France goes to war, like she would with the Czechs. So actually a pretty good outcome for France, considering all she did was hold an election this turn. That is the 3rd and final country that bid for political option, which means we're at the end of the political phase. We're going to be rolling now into the WIF portion of the turn. That means it's time to roll initiative, roll weather for the first impulse, and show you the reinforcements that are going to be showing up on map here in May-June. Here we are in the May-June turn here. You can see we have a number of Chinese reinforcements. This was the infantry army that was shattered in the attack last turn. They also built 2 militia units, one of which is a communist militia unit in Xi'an, and they'll get another one in a nationalist in Kunming. The Italians get a naval air and a pilot, and I think they probably will go ahead and place this naval air on map. So we'll use the pilot to man those aircraft. The French are going to get a garrison. The Germans get an infantry corps and a mountain corps. This was a result of the Anschluss last turn, and they also pick up a pilot, so we'll add that pilot to their track. That gives them 2 pilots right now, and we'll take a look and see what they have in the reserve pool as far as aircraft go, decide if we want to put anything on map just now. They are also going to get 1 convoy point, and then they have 1 cruiser. They get the Prince Eugen going into the construction pool. And the Italians, while we're there, are going to get their Red Sea flotilla in the construction pool. And while we're on the subject of ships, the Japanese get an amphibious transport. The first cycle, that's going to go into the construction pool as well. They're going to get a convoy point on map. The United States gets USS Lexington on map. And then the Commonwealth, we'll see HMS Illustrious go into the construction pool, and the French will get the Commandant Test in the construction pool. The pilot marker here, we were using this for the Spanish nationalists, so they will get a pilot, which they're going to immediately place into the aircraft they have in the reserve pool, so that will come on map. And then we have the Commonwealth and France each getting 1 pilot, and I'm reasonably certain, well, maybe not. I thought the Commonwealth will be using this pilot this turn, but they've got some, I think they've got some carrier planes coming up in the next turn or 2 that they would rather kind of wait and use the pilot for them. So I don't know that the Commonwealth is actually going to be placing any aircraft on map this turn. And that's going to do it for the reinforcements. We'll get these placed. The initiative was interesting. The initial roll, the Allies are sitting, or I'm sorry, the Democrats are sitting with a -1 DRM. Both the Communists and Fascists had a +2. However, on the first rolls, the Democrats rolled a 9, -1 is an 8. The Fascists rolled a 1, +2 is 3, and the Soviets, or the Communists, rolled a 2, +2 is 4. It's going to be a good weather turn. It's going to be a long turn. The Fascists, particularly the Japanese, would like as many impulses as possible to take advantage of that good weather, so they demanded a reroll. They did the reroll, and in the reroll, they still lost out to the Democrats. So the faction order for this turn will be Democrats, Fascists, and then finally Communists. The weather roll was a 7, which means fine weather everywhere for the first time in a few turns. And I think that means it's just time to place the actual reinforcements, and then we'll pick up with the Democrats. First impulse, good weather everywhere. Let's see what happens. We're going to begin the first impulse of May-June 1938 in Asia. And for the sake of continuity, to make it a little easier for you to follow at home, rather than going step by step through the sequence of play where we'll do all of the naval moves in Asia, then all the naval moves in Europe, then the land moves in Asia, land moves in Europe, and so on, I'll just show you the entire impulse in Asia. We'll run through the sequence of play here, resolve this, and then we'll go ahead and do the same for Europe. I think it'll flow a little bit better for you. Now, of course, when we reach the point where we have an entire world at war, and there are things occurring on the Asian maps or the European maps that are going to affect the other maps, then we'll go ahead and maybe resort to a strict sequence of play order. But for now, I don't think we have to worry about that, and this, I think, will be a little bit easier for you all to watch, like I said. So with that, we are in China. The Democrats are up first. The Chinese have no port attacks, naval air missions, or naval movement. There's no naval combat as well. No strategic bombardment. The Chinese have no air force, so there's not going to be any ground strike missions either. Brings us up to rail movement. Now, China has selected a land action type for this impulse. Remember, the Japanese are going to be restricted to combined impulses for the first, I think it was 12 turns of the war, because they opted to go with the Peking Bridge incident to kick it off. But the Chinese are not restricted as such. So with their land impulse, they do get one rail move. They're going to rail move the Kunming militia here up to Changsha. And then we're going to move on to the land movement. Now, I think I mentioned this a couple of episodes ago, but in the standard WiFCE game, both the nationalist and the communist activities fall under the China activities limits. That's not the case in Days of Decision. The Chinese communists actually fall under the communist activities limits. So therefore, you won't see the Chi-Coms up here doing anything until we get to the communist impulse of each turn. So the land moves for the Chinese. Well, we know we're going to go ahead and reinforce Chang up here with the 17th Army to try and make that hex as difficult to take for the Japanese, trying to form some sort of line here for the Japanese. I don't know that the nationalists are going to have enough, that they just simply don't have enough troops to really form a solid line across here. They're hoping that the communists can beat the Japanese to the area up here where you see the resource. So we shall see. Now in the south, the nationalists are also concerned about limiting the Japanese bridgehead here at Fuchao. So to that end, they're going to bring the Shanghai militia down to the south. Now the question is, do they want to move the 6th Army here into the mountains? If they do, it's going to end up turning it face down because of the movement point cost, which is 4 here, obviously exceeding the 3 that they have. It'll put the Chinese in the mountains, which is good, but it's going to invert them, which is bad. It just depends on how badly the Chinese want to restrict the Japanese beachhead here, and I think they are going to determine it is in their best interest to limit this to as few hexes as possible. They're also going to try to bring the Canton militia up here. So as of right now, you know, you can see the furthest the Japanese can go without actually making an attack is going to be these 4 hexes here. And of course, the Chinese are looking to restrict that even further. Ideally, they're going to bottle them up in the single hex here, allowing them to, any reinforcements that the nationalists get will then hopefully be able to be committed up here in the north where the Japanese main attack appears to be. And with the land movement done, we've got no air transport, no debarking of units at sea, no invasions or paradrops. Land combat, the Chinese simply aren't quite strong enough, and with the German political option where they withdrew their advisors, now the nationalists are half strength when attacking, which is going to reduce their offensive options even further. So no land combat there. There's no air to rebase, and nothing that can be reorganized. They do have these 2 units face down, but there's nobody nearby to reorganize them. So that's going to wrap it up for the Chinese impulse. And now we're going to head over to Europe, probably specifically to Spain, to see what the Republicans do. Here in Europe, the Democrats actually have a few things we're going to do, just a couple of minor things before we actually get to Spain. First, we're going to start off with naval movement, and the Commonwealth is going to send HMS Furious out of the UK into the Bay of Biscay down to Cape St. Vincent here. They are sending Furious out to reinforce Force H, which is based right here at Gibraltar. So that will be the extent of the Commonwealth's naval moves for this impulse. Again, they are not terribly interested in digging into their oil stockpile just yet to have additional units move. That's going to bring us all the way down to land movement. And the French actually have a land move here. If you recall, they received an infantry corps, I think it was an infantry corps, as a reinforcement, which they placed in Strasbourg. It's going to allow the garrison here to slide 1 hex down along the Maginot. And that is going to do it for the French land moves. The Republicans are restricted by the French activities limits. So because the French used up one of those land moves, that leaves the Republicans with just 2 land moves. And we'll see if or what the Republicans decide to do with that. So let's get a little better look at Spain here. In Spain, the Republicans don't have any naval moves. They're not going to be doing any strategic bombardment or ground strikes with their lone air unit, which brings us up to the land movement phase, or land movement step. They do see an opportunity here, and I think knowing that the situation is just going to get worse for them over the next several turns than better, they are going to attempt to do something about it. They are bringing, oops, this guy was here, they're bringing that 1 strength garrison division out of Madrid, as you saw, and they've got 1 more land move available, but I don't think they're going to be using that just now. So that brings us to air transport, of which there is none. No debark of land units, no invasions or paradrops, but it does bring us to land combat. And the Republicans are actually going to kick things off here in the summer with an attack on the Blue Division's hex here. They're going to attack from these 3 hexes. So we have the militia here for 4. We have the Red Division makes it 5. Azania is 9. 10 with the garrison, 13 with the cavalry, and 18 with the Guard Infantry Corps. So it's 18 factors attacking a defense of 6, which means they've actually somehow managed to get a 3-to-1, which given the generally weak strengths of the Spanish units is no small feat. So now we need to determine whether or not there's going to be any air support or HQ support. Since 3-to-1 is probably going to leave the attackers face down, including the headquarters here, the Republicans have decided to go ahead and throw Azania in with some offensive support with his 2 reorg factors there. And as a response to that, the Nationalists don't really want to give up or give the Republicans a +1 on the 3-to-1 column, so they will commit Franco as well, which will result in both the headquarters being turned face down at the conclusion of the combat. I'll just turn Franco down now to get that out of the way. No offensive air support. The extra 1 factor from the air units, technically it's 1 factor. Yeah, the 1 factor would not make any difference there. The Spanish Nationalists, though, have a decision to make. If they decide to send in their air unit with defensive ground support, and it were to get through, those factors would drop the combat an entire odds column from 3-to-1 to 2-to-1. However, if the bombers here are acting as fighter bombers, their air-to-air is going to be reduced. I don't know if we want to necessarily give up the advantage there. Well, you know what? Why not? It's still early in the turn, so the Spanish Nationalists will go ahead and send in the air units providing some defensive air support. Now, because it's in a forest, those tactical factors of 2 are going to be halved to 1, assuming it gets through, but 1 is all they really need because it is currently 18-6. That would make it 18-7 and drop it to a 2-to-1. The Republicans then have to decide whether or not they're going to try to intercept that, and of course they will, to preserve the 3-to-1 odds that they currently have. So we have our first air battle of the game. Let's go ahead and we will remove the two air units. We'll have them set up their fighter and bomber streams. This isn't going to be terribly complex, given that there's one unit on each side. And then we'll resolve the air unit before we, or the air battle, before we come back and resolve the land battle. All right, here we are. We can see the bomber and fighter streams have been established by both sides. The Republicans have their lone interceptor as the only unit in the fighter stream. The Nationalists have no fighter stream because their only air unit is flying as a fighter bomber and is therefore the front bomber in the bomber stream down here. And obviously the Nationalists, or the Republicans, have no bomber stream themselves. Now, because the Nationalist fighters are flying as fighter bombers, we subtract 1 from their air-to-air value of 4, which makes it a 3. Compared to the 3 of the Republicans, that's going to give us a differential of 0 for both sides. So we're going to be on the 0 column right here of the air-to-air chart, and we'll be rolling 2d10, as you can see, and then cross-referencing to get our results. Now, for the first round, and in every round, the inactive side rolls its dice first, and then if any results are achieved, the active side will have to implement those results before they roll their dice, even though the results won't take effect. They take effect simultaneously. So, first up then is the Nationalists for their first roll in round 1. And roll a pretty decent roll, I think, of 15. 15 on the 0 column. If we look here, that is going to be an AA. That's attacker aborts the defender's front fighter or front bomber. So the Republicans only have a single air unit here. This fighter will be aborted, which means they're going to have to make this particular shot count. Otherwise, the air battle will be over and the Nationalists will have gotten their air through. So here comes a Republican response, and it's a good one. They rolled a 4. Now, I say it's a good one. You may look at that and say, well, that's a really low roll as opposed to a really high roll. The way the air combat chart is worked out is that rolls that are in the middle here, 11, these are the worst results that you as the dice roller want. Either really low or really high, out at the extremes. It's kind of because it's a 2d10, they've set this up as like a bell curve for the results. So your most common result of 11 is going to be the least effective. But when you get out on the extremes at either end, you're going to be pretty effective. Now we rolled a 3 and a 1 for a total of 4. That is an AX, which means the attacker is going to destroy the defender's front fighter or front bomber. And the term attacker defender can be a little confusing in air combat. In air combat, the results there, attacker and defender, in this case, mean the attacker is the player that is rolling the dice at that moment, and the defender is the one who is suffering the result or not rolling the dice. Which means each time you roll the dice, the attacker is changing. It's got nothing to do with the underlying ground combat or who initiated the air combat. In this instance, AA, AX, attacker abort, attacker destroys, refers specifically to the person who is rolling the dice at that moment, which means when we rolled the Nationalist dice, they rolled a 15, which is a pretty decent roll, and they got an AA result, which is attacker aborts defender's front fighter. Since the Nationalists were rolling the dice at that moment, they were the attacker, which means they get to decide, if there were multiple options, whether to abort either the Republican front fighter or the Republican front bomber. There was no choice in this case because there was only one defending aircraft. Now we turn it around and the Republicans are rolling the dice. They rolled a 4, which is an excellent result, and that was attacker destroys defender's front fighter, front bomber. So the attacker, meaning the dice roller, gets to choose which of the front fighter or bomber gets destroyed. And again, in this case, there's only one unit. And that means that the Republicans have won this air battle, even though they were aborted as a result of it. They won the battle because they have destroyed the Nationalist aircraft and prevented the defensive ground support from making it through. Also, one other thing I want to mention, you can see we've got green, yellow, and red boxes here. For those of you unfamiliar with that, this has to do with the pilot optional rule, which I always use. If the aircraft is destroyed and the result is a green box, it means the pilot survives. If it is a red box and it's a destroyed result, whether it's a defender destroys or attacker destroys, it means that the pilot is killed. If it's a yellow box, you can see here that the pilot survives if it's shot down over friendly territory. Now, in this case, the Republicans are attacking the Nationalists in the forest. It would have been considered friendly territory if a yellow box had been achieved. So in order to have killed the Nationalist pilots as well as shoot down the aircraft, the Republicans would have needed a red box result, which on the 0 column you can see here would have been an 18, 19, or 20. So a successful first battle in the air for the Republicans. This is going to preserve their 3-to-1 odds in the ground result, or in the ground attack, which is coming up next. And the Republicans, or the Nationalists, are going to send their pilot or their aircraft to the force pool, and they will be able to add a pilot to the pilot's track. So it could have gone much better for the Nationalists, but the Republicans are happy with that. The aircraft now that participated in the combat, since none of them are bombers that are going to be impacting the land battle, these fighters, whether or not they had been aborted, would now return to base. So we'll return to base face down here, and we'll head back to the map for the resolution of the now 3-to-1 land attack. And back in Spain, you can see the Republicans have returned to base their fighters in the hex they flew from. That's not required. You can actually return to base to any legal hex that is within range of the hex where the air combat took place. And you can actually rebase at your full range, not merely the half range that they used for the interception, or half range if they were flying as fighter bombers. But in order to keep as much of the front lines under their air protection as possible, they decided to go ahead and rebase them where they came from. Now that moves us on to the land combat resolution, and now the Nationalists have a decision to make: blitzkrieg table or assault table. Looking at the 3-to-1 column on the assault table, the best that the Republicans can hope for is to have half of their units remain face up, and that's only if they roll a 9 or a 10. So on an 8 or less, all of the Republican units making the attack, so all of the units in these 3 hexes, will be face down at the end of this attack. Looking at the 3-to-1 column on the blitz table, you can see that a 7 or 8 will allow half of them to remain face up, and a 9 or 10 will allow all of them to remain face up, obviously with the exception of the HQ, which provided offensive support. Therefore, he will be turned face down no matter what. Looking that over, the Nationalists, knowing that it's going to be a long turn, since it's May, June, we expect good weather. The Nationalists are more interested in getting as many of the Republicans face down now early in the turn as possible than with any potential losses they may suffer here, because with probably 2/3 of the Republican forces face down, that's going to free up the remaining Nationalist forces to do some mischief without the Republicans being able to respond. So with that, we're going to go with the 3-to-1 on the assault table. And now for the big die roll here, we'll see if the Republican performance in the air has inspired their Army compatriots at all. They have not rolled well thus far in their 2 previous attacks. And but I wish I could write this, but you just can't make that up. That is a 1 that the Republicans have uncorked here. This is kind of a disaster in a number of ways. A 1 on the 3-to-1 column is going to be 2 Republican losses for 0 Nationalist losses. So as good as they did in the air, they did poorly on the ground. And if anyone of my previous WiFCE gaming partners is watching this, they're probably laughing their socks off right now, because I am known for that. I will do extraordinarily well in the air battles, and to include any ground strikes. And when it comes to that land resolution die roll, I will usually blow it right there. So Unfortunately for the Republicans, they continue their streak of incompetence on the ground. The two losses, though, fortunately for them, like I say, is they can remove the infantry division and they can remove the garrison division. So at least they didn't lose any full-sized units, any corps-sized units as a result, and their front lines really have not been weakened as a result. The problem is these four remaining corps here are now all face down. That's going to give the Nationalists a +1 if they were to attack either of those hexes, or a +2 if they were to decide to go after the stack there where the air unit is based. We'll send the division and garrison unit back to the Republican force pool, and that's going to bring us up to air rebases for the Democrats and then reorganization, which unfortunately they can't do because their only headquarters is face down. That is going to do it for a rather action-filled first impulse here in May-June, and I think this might be setting the tempo for what could be a big turn. We know it's going to be a long turn, and now the Nationalists, having suffered no losses, they have their headquarters face down, but other than that, they're in a good position here to perhaps counterattack. Let's see what they decide to do with the gift the Republicans have just handed him here in the next impulse. We're going to stay right here in Spain for impulse number 2, the first impulse for the fascists. And the Nationalists are now trying to see how best they can exploit the Republican failure here in the last impulse. There is an opportunity. They've got a bit of freedom of maneuver from the fact that from here on over, the Republicans are face down and will be unable to react. They do have 2 infantry corps here, a 4-3 and a 3-3. They have a face-up garrison here in Valencia as well as the garrison in Madrid. But that's all they have in Madrid. Below the garrison is the one oil resource that the Republicans have. So Madrid is, in fact, fairly vulnerable. The question is, can the Nationalists get there in time to do anything about it? They're going to have a long enough turn to get there, I believe, but the Republicans will be able to see that coming and will definitely reinforce Madrid if it looks like the Nationalists are going to try and do an end run around the line and take a stab at it. The other opportunity that sort of jumps out at the Nationalists is the fact that Azaña, the headquarters, is now a bit exposed here. He's alone in the hex and face down, which would give the Nationalists a +1 in any attack they make. Now, Azaña's combat factor is a 4. We can see that, a 4. It's going to be doubled for the mountains to an 8, so it's going to be very difficult, probably impossible for the Nationalists to get a decent odds attack on there. But I think what we're going to do, since they have no naval activity and no air activity, we'll go right to rail movement, which they have none, and then land movement. Now, they are working under the Italian action limits, and I believe we said that was 3 land moves in a combined for Italy. Yes, indeed. So what they're going to do is a little shuffling of the line. They're going to take the 3-3 here and go 1-2. And they're going to bring this 4-3 over, 1-2, and then without any debarks, invasions, paradrops, we're going to come right to land combat. And I think they are going to make their first attack here with these 3 hexes. Unfortunately, Franco is face down and unable to participate. But we will have 6 plus 4 is 10, plus another 6 for a total of 16. 16 to 4 doubled, which is 8. That's a 2-to-1, and it is going to be a +1 for Azaña being face down. So a 2-to-1 +1, not a great attack, but if they can kill the headquarters, you can see not only is it going to cost them 5 to replace, it's going to take 3 turns, and they'll have no headquarters on map to provide any sort of support should the Nationalists get successful here and be able to continue to press their attacks over the rest of the summer. Now, a 2-to-1 on the assault table, like I said, doesn't look all that good. The +1 means we don't have to worry about this top line result here. So on a 1, the Nationalists could still suffer 2 unit losses with no casualties inflicted on the Republicans. 2 or 3 will reduce that to 1 loss, but they're going to need to roll at least a 4 on the die to kill Azania. Now that will cost them 2 units themselves, so it might be a bit of a Pyrrhic victory if that happens. But I think that in the end, on balance, they would be satisfied with that. I think the primary goal here is to try to kill Azania. Now, what if the Republicans decide to use the blitz table? It doesn't get that much better for them. It actually makes it easier to kill Azania with less loss to the Nationalists, and only a 6 or 7 will keep him alive. Not great odds there. Or a 9 would give a blitz result where Azania would be removed from the map but would arrive as a reinforcement next turn. So Republicans don't like those odds. I think they're better off, or they'd rather take a chance here and see if maybe the Nationalists are as bad at attacking as they are, or at the very least maybe make it a costly victory for them. So with that said, it'll be a 2-1 +1 on the assault table, and we will now see how the first Nationalist attack of the Civil War goes. Again, Nationalists are looking for a 4 or better on the die. And they do much better than a 4. That is a 7, which will become an 8. So if we look at the 8 results on the table here, 2-1 +1, 8. It's going to be 1 Nationalist, 1 attacker loss, 2 defender losses. Everyone will be face down. So they just missed making it a bloodless victory, but they will be more than happy to take what amounts to an exchange, because they have included the blue division here, and I have a feeling that's the first of many times we'll see the blue division going to the force pool. But they did kill the Republican HQ. I think what we'll do is advance the 4-3 into the hex, and then the remaining 2 units will also become face down as well. So a better result for the Nationalists. We have no aircraft to rebase. We have no reorganization capabilities, but you can see now that the west end and the center, or the west end of the Republican line and the center of the Nationalist line are now all face down. And we've only got a couple of face-up units for both sides left. So I think the summer will slow down a little bit after this initial frenzy, simply from a lack of anything to do anything with. But things are moving in eastern Spain, and on the whole, I would say the Spanish Nationalists have come out ahead so far this turn. We'll see how this develops. I don't think we're going to get much more in the way of activity this turn, but we'll see how it develops over the next couple turns over the rest of the summer, especially with the good weather. With that done, I think we are now going to head out to Asia and see what the Japanese do with their first impulse of this second turn of war. Here we are in Asia, where Japan is looking to continue her invasion of China. And keep in mind that she is considered to be at limited war with China, which means she's restricted to her combined impulses for, this is the second of what will be 12 turns. She is going to actually pay the oil cost for the combined action type. And with Japan, that is 7/10 oil. She's currently got 9/10 on the track, so we'll take that down to 2/10 of an oil left for her. This will allow her to fully move all of her oil-dependent units this impulse. And we're going to start off, we don't have any port attacks or naval air missions, but we do have some naval movement. One of the moves, and since Japan is no longer considered a neutral major power, as long she's not limited per ship now, task force that begin together, move together, and end up at the same location count as a single move. So the Kido Butai is going to sail into the China Sea, South China Sea, and enter the 3 box down here. That's the first naval move. The second naval move, the transports are going to sail out of Taihoku and they are going to pick up the Tokyo militia and end up in the 0 box here. Those are the 2 naval moves out of the way. There's no naval combat, no strategic bombardment, ground strikes. Now, question is, do we want to attempt ground strike again with the naval bombers here at Port Arthur? And one of the weaknesses of the Japanese military is, in fact, their land bombers. They don't have very good tactical factors. They've got some really nice naval bombers, but as far as their land bombers go, they have a lot that are just plain not good. And while this is an excellent naval bomber with a 14 range and a 3 naval air factor, it's only got 1 attack factor. I don't think we're going to try a ground strike with him. I think we're going to save him for perhaps some ground support if we end up making an attack this impulse. So that's going to bring us to rail movement, which yeah, we might as well rail this guy here to Mukden. And then we will get on with our land movement. We have a total of 3 land moves available to us. So I think with the first one, we're going to slide this cavalry into the mountains there. That's going to eat up all 4 movement points. And then we're going to bring the infantry army up into the mountains here for 4 as well. And then I think we'll leave those guys there. I think that's going to do it as far as land moves for now. That's 2 of our 3. We have no air transport, brings us to debark, and that's what we're going to save our 3rd land move for. And we're going to bring the Tokyo militia ashore at Tientsin. So we'll throw those guys in there. No invasions or pair drops brings us up to land combat. Now, we are able to do a single attack each impulse under the combined limitations. And I'm looking at perhaps attacking Peking here. We've got 3 and 10 is 13. That's 14. That's 20, 24. So 24, the defenders have 2 units that are 3 each. So that's a total of 6 defense. It would be a 4-to-1. And if we throw in some HQ support, even if they commit Chang on the other end, it still should give us a +1. That'd be a 4-to-1 +1. On the assault table, if we could roll a 4 or better, very similar to the nationalist attack in Spain, we would take the hex and capture the city, although everybody would be face down. I think the Japanese will be a little aggressive and go ahead and take that chance. 4-to-1 +1. One of my personal rules when fighting with the Japanese, particularly in China, is to never make an attack, if at all possible, unless you have a militia unit involved. The militia units are generally cheaper than your regular infantry corps, and they show up in a single turn as opposed to 2 turns. So we are, in fact, going to go ahead and go for it here. They are going to have Uematsu commit some offensive HQ support, so he'll be turned face down. That he has 3 reorganization points. If Chang were to lend some defensive HQ support, his 1 subtracted from the 3 would still leave 2 divided by 4 is 0.5. That rounds up to 1. So the Japanese are going to get a +1 either way. Therefore, Chang is going to kind of stay out of it and not provide any defensive support, which means we are ready to go to the dice tray and see how the attack turns out. Now, the Chinese do have a choice of which table to use, assault or blitz table. But looking things over, if they were to go with the blitz table on a 4-to-1 +1, the Japanese will take the city on anything but a 1. And more importantly, if they would have a 50% chance of all of their attacking units remaining face up. Again, this is going to be a long turn. And the Japanese certainly have advantage in numbers. So for that reason, I think the Chinese are going to stick with the assault table. That reduces the Japanese chance of having everyone remain face up to needing an 8 or better on the die. And it's a little bit more of a bloody table, so they're looking to inflict as much pain on the Japanese as they can and hopefully slow them down here. So 4 to 1 plus 1 on the assault table. Here we go. Looked to be initially a bad result, but a 6 will get the job done. Plus 1 is 7 for the Japanese. That's actually pretty good result for them. It's going to be no loss to the Japanese, a 1S result. That's a shatter result. So one of the units is going to be destroyed and the other one is going to be shattered to come back as a reinforcement next turn. So let's go back and see which of the units the Chinese are going to kill off and which one they'll take for the shatter result. Also, before we go, the Japanese did manage to have half of their remaining units stay face up. So not quite all, but they did get some that'll remain face up, and that could be important for the balance of this turn. Back on map here, the Chinese have 2 units, one of which is going to die, the other is going on the spiral. You can see they have the Peking militia and the Peking warlord. The warlord units are restricted to the city they are named after or 1 hex of that city. So they're going to just go ahead and kill off the Peking warlord forces, and they'll place the militia unit on the spiral to come back next turn. Now, they are going to lose control of Peking, which means if this Peking militia unit were to have, if it had been the other way around, and the militia unit were destroyed, they would also lose the warlord unit since they're losing control of Peking, and the Peking militia would not go into the Chinese force pools again. So for that reason, they're going to shatter the militia unit and have them come back next turn. Actually, you know what? I'm going to see if that's the case. They may lose the militia as well since they've lost the city. Normally, because the militia will arrive as a reinforcement in the city it's named after. So I'll check on that. We will advance. We'll just advance all 3 of these guys into the city. Now we have 5 attacking units. Half of them are going to stay face up. Well, we know we'll go ahead and turn this 4-3 face down since he's going to remain here. And then we'll have, let's see, is it round up or half the remaining attacking land units stay face up? I think that's half rounded up. So that would mean 3 remain face up. And we're going to keep the cavalry face up. We'll keep the cavalry division, and we'll keep the, let's see, do we want, you know what, I think we'll keep the militia face up. That way, if we end up making another attack this turn, the militia unit will be available to take any potential losses. And it is a slightly better combat unit than the infantry corps that's there. So another successful attack by the Japanese here in China. Some of the they're slowing down a bit, but things are not looking good for the Chinese in the north. After land combat, we've got air rebases, and I don't know that we, let's see, well, we could rebase that guy, but I don't think there's any reason to rebase him quite yet. And then reorganization, with the headquarters having provided support, is unable to reorganize anybody because he's now face down. So that's going to wrap it up for the fascists' first impulse here in May-June. The Japanese continue to push, albeit a bit slowly, into northern China. I think their advance might start to pick up some steam here now that they've managed to take out Peking. So we'll see what happens here, but for now it's over to the communists for their first impulse. And again, they're doing a combined since they're neutral. This, though, will allow the Chinese communists to move. The Soviets themselves aren't going to be doing really anything. So the Chi-Coms have 5 land moves that they can make. That's really all they're going to be doing. With those, they are going to send the cavalry here. They will bring the militia here, and we'll bring the mile is going to be here. We can go up there, and maybe we'll put, yep, we'll leave these guys here, I think, and we can move that 5-3 up there. That's what is it? 1, 2, 3 land moves for the communists, and I think that's about all we've got over here. I don't see anything in Europe for the Soviets. So that's going to bring us back around to the Democrats, but first we need the next weather roll. Well, just when we think we're going to get on a roll here, the weather decides to throw a wrench into things. Rolled a 2 for weather, which means we're looking at storm in the Arctic, rain in North Temperate, fair in the Med, storm in North Monsoon, and rain in both South Monsoon and South Temperate. The impulse marker is going to go up 2 boxes after each impulse, and there will be a +2 to next impulse's weather roll. So a little bit of a late spring storm rolling through, which is going to hamper some things. Not so much here in Spain, because we are dealing with the Med most of where it matters, but it is going to potentially have some effect over in China. Now for the Democrats, really with Democrats, neither Spain nor the Commonwealth are going to be doing anything to speak of. So we're looking at the Republicans here. They are going to try and fill that gap now in their line with the loss of their headquarters by sliding that corps over, and that's about all they're really going to do. The only other two units they have face up are the garrisons here and there. And you know what? Take that back. We're going to go back. They are going to go ahead and do a rail move to bring the slightly better garrison corps into Madrid. And then they'll do that land move there. And that's going to wrap up what is a very uneventful Democrat impulse here in Europe. And now we'll go back to China, where the Chinese are going to have some interesting decisions to make. So let's go take a look at that. Well, there is no good weather anywhere in China. It's going to be rain here north of the weather line up here. This is all rain with doubled movement costs, and then below the line here in southern China, it's actually storm. From a movement perspective, it doesn't make any difference, but with the movement point cost doubled, that means if Chang and the unit he's stacked with attempt to move anywhere, normally in good weather they would be able to enter any of these clear hexes and remain face up. But if they move now, they're going to be face down, and we can be pretty sure that the weather is going to be good, at least in in northern China here. The weather will be good thanks to the +2 modifier to the next die roll, and we know the fascists are going to get at least 1 more, probably 2 more at a minimum impulses. So if Chang were to try to withdraw or form a line, anything, try and get behind the Yellow River here, he'll be face down, which will the Japanese be able to attack? Well, probably not in the upcoming impulse because of the bad weather. But again, that bad weather is not going to stick around very long, and the real question becomes, will they attack in a future impulse? And with Chang face down, any of the Chinese units face down, again, it's going to make the Japanese attacks a little bit easier with the +1. So the Chinese are really kind of stuck here. They're not happy with where they currently are. They want to get Chang and that unit out of there, but they don't necessarily want to end up here either. They'd like to get maybe on the backside of south of the Yellow River, or move a unit into Taiyuan there, which would at least give them a line that the Japanese would have to then try and force. But in doing so, they're going to be weakening their hex. The Japanese have already proven they can blast their way into a relatively weakly held hex. Certainly anything with 6 defense strength or less, they've been able to manage fairly well. In the south here, I do know that we can go ahead and move the Shanghai militia into the forest. They would be turned face down regardless of the weather, because the forest costs 3. Same with the mountains here. So we'll bring the Canton militia into the mountains, and that is going to give them a nice tight perimeter around Fuchao. And who knows, maybe in a future turn the Chinese may even attempt to make an attack and force the Japanese and the Marines out of Fuchao, which would then free up a sizable portion of their unmapped forces. Obviously, the Japanese are going to want to grab these resources, continue to push south and west into China as they go. They're going to be slowed down, at least for one impulse, but it's kind of a tricky situation here. Wasn't anticipating bad weather. And I think what we'll end up doing is maybe, I hate to leave Chang. We know that the Japanese have a unit face down in both of these hexes, so they're going to be they won't be able to necessarily attack with full force out of either one of them. So I think we are going to take the chance as the Chinese and slide the corps over there. And we've got a line formed here. Now the question is, who's going to, there's a race for the resources here between the communists and the Japanese. But I think that's going to do it for the Chinese impulse here. Their second impulse. That's also going to wrap up the impulse for the Democrats. And now we're going to move on to the Fascist after I move the marker up 2 boxes on the track. We're going to stay here in Asia for the Fascist second impulse. Got to take a look at what the Japanese are going to do here. The Japanese are really unhappy about that weather roll with the added movement point costs. They really want this resource, and the communists are going to be moving next. And so the race is on, as it were. Now, whoever moves into this hex is going to be face down, which normally is not a big deal, except remember that with rain, the supply range is reduced to 2 European hexes, which on this map means basically adjacent. And here's the headquarters. So any Japanese unit that moves into this hex is going to be face down. Peking is not a supply source yet, if you will, for the Japanese. So if we were to move this cavalry corps into the mountain hex here, it would be turned face down. It's black print. Its strength becomes a 1 then. Now, yeah, it's going to be doubled for the mountains to a 2, but the communists could move the First Army here. It's desert, which means the rain is not going to have any effect on the movement cost, and it is 3. So the communists could mount an attack of 8. They are going to be halved by the river, which would be 4, 4 to 2, 2 to 1. Yeah, I think the communists would take that gamble, especially if it meant they stood a good chance of retaking this mountain hex and the resource. But the Japanese don't want to give that up. So what they're going to do is they're going to use all 3 of these land moves to really grab that hex. Because now what that does is, even though they're all face down and out of supply, we do have the white print Tokyo militia, which is a 3, plus the 2 cavalry units would be a 4. Now it's a 5 defense. Doubled for mountains is a 10. That does leave Peking a bit exposed with just a single face-down unit there, but there's no way the communists are going to be able to get there. And Chang himself is not likely to make a 1-to-1 +1 attack, since the defender is a 5, especially with some air power nearby that could make that an even worse attack. So Japanese willing to take the risk of denuding Peking of units for the time being. And like I said, we expect there will be good weather next impulse, which will allow the Japanese hopefully the opportunity to reinforce Peking here and the front line. They do have They do have several units here that they can begin to move up. So an uneventful second impulse for the Japanese, due again mostly to the weather issues, which will clear up next time. Let's go back over to Spain real quick and do the European fascists. There's not going to be much going on over there, but probably just a couple little things to show you. And then there's still no chance to end the turn, so we'll move on to the communist second impulse after Spain. Now back here for the second fascist impulse, the Italians did, in this impulse, they went ahead and used the rail move to rail the headquarters from Taranto up to Turin there. And they are content to let the nationalists use the land moves, which they are going to go ahead and do. They're going to get this cavalry unit out of here. This is med, so there's no double movement costs here. We're going to go 2, 3, and then 4, 5 to get to, actually, do you want to do that? No, we'll go 2, 3, 4, and 5, I think. We'll end up right there. That is sadly all that the nationalists are able to do here in this impulse. Now we will move the marker up 2 boxes on the track. Again, there was no chance to end the turn there, and we are in impulse number 8 for the communists, and that means we're going to have to go back to China and see what the Chi-Coms do. The Soviets again are just going to sit tight at least until they get a few more units on map before they start to reveal their next move in Europe, or perhaps even in Asia. So let's go back to China and take a look at what the Chinese communists decide to do in the bad weather. Like the other two ideologies before them, they are going to be saddled with the bad weather. I think they might, I don't know if they're going to, they're going to take the Sion militia here and I think move them up there, and maybe we'll bring first. Now we'll leave them there for now, I think. So again, we do have the Lan Chao militia, and we'll move them, bring them forward here. That's going to turn them face down. They're going to be face down regardless of the weather. So with that, the communists, they almost considered passing. If they had passed, it would have been a -2 to the end of turn die roll. And right now it's a 0 or less to end the turn, so the turn can't end unless they pass. Were they to pass instead of doing these minor moves, they'd need a 2 or less to end it, but I think they're going to forego that, and we'll go ahead and let that stand. Like I said, there's no chance to end the turn, so now we're back to the Democrats after it goes up 2 more boxes to the 10th impulse, and we will need to roll some weather. This weather roll will result in good weather everywhere except perhaps North Monsoon and the Arctic. So let's see what we come up with here for this next weather. Well, the weather roll was a 3, which is not great, but we did get +2 for last weather, giving us a net result of 5. That's going to give us fine weather everywhere except North Monsoon, where it's rain, which was kind of expected. It is the rainy season down there in North Monsoon right now in May, June. The Democrats, looking things over, there's not a whole lot they have to do. Both here in Spain, there's really not much they can do here in Spain as well as in China. And with that in mind, the turn will end on a 0 or less. I think the Democrats are just going to go ahead and pass and try and drive this turn to a quick end before the nationalists in Spain or the Japanese in China can exploit the situation any further. So with that, we're going to go straight to a end of turn die roll here. Now, because all of the major powers in the ideology passed, that's going to be a -2 to this roll. So 2 or less, and we will see the end of the turn. And wouldn't you know it, the strategy worked. That 2 brings us to a very premature end to the May-June turn. What looked to be a long and eventually profitable turn for the fascists has been brought to a very sudden end, which means we're going to be looking at return to base and final reorganization before we do some production here. So what I'll do is I'll just, rather than make you watch me go through all of the fiddly bits with returning to base and reorganization, I'm just going to go ahead and take care of that. I'll cut this now, and then I'll go ahead and do the production, and we'll pick back up once I've done the production and can show you what everybody has decided to build this turn. Now, the Japanese captured a Chinese factory and a Chinese resource, but that did not affect anyone's production this turn. The reason for that is twofold. First, with the factory, it's a blue factory, so the Japanese cannot use it. The loss to the Chinese of that factory, though, is going to have no impact because they did not have enough resources to fully utilize all of their factories. So this is just one of the unused factories that they've lost. Now, as far as the resource goes, that did reduce the Chinese production point from 12 to 11. However, with the 1/4 production multiple they're sitting at, that reduced their build points from 3 to 2.75, which rounds back up to 3. So no impact to the Chinese there. The Japanese are not able to use that resource this turn, and this is the second leg of that sort of 3-legged stool of house rules regarding convoy points, resource transportation, and submarines and convoy attacks in general. In previous editions of WIF, you not only had a convoy pipeline placement segment at the beginning of the turn where major powers could freely rearrange their convoys as they see fit, but then immediately following that was the resource transportation segment where all the resources at that moment were transported or considered to be transported to the factories for use in the production that turn. Now, what that means is a major power that captures a resource on a particular turn will be unable to use that resource until the following turn, which to me makes more thematic sense than the change now where you're able to basically or potentially move into a hex, capture a resource on the very last impulse of a turn, and yet then turn around and be able to use that resource as if you had controlled it for the entire turn. So we're taking a page out of the old WIF rule books and turning things back a bit in time to where now major powers will have to control, or we'll say major powers can only use the resources that they control during the resource transportation segment, which is going to occur at the beginning of the WIF portion of the turn rather than here at the end. So what this means is in July, August, during the convoy pipeline placement segment, the Japanese will have an opportunity to move a sufficient number of convoy points out to sea to establish a pipeline to enable them to rail the resource they now control to a port and then ship it back to a factory in Japan. That will increase the Japanese build points, but that's not going to take effect, like I said, until July, August. So now that we have that out of the way, we'll go ahead and take a look at what each of the major powers decided to build this turn, as well as the 2 Spanish factions. We'll start with the fascists as usual, and Italy. Italy is still trying to claw her way out of debt, so she has limited her production this turn to simply laying down a new battleship for a grand total of 2 build points. Germany is going to build 1 infantry corps. They're going to train a pilot, and they are going to build a twin-engine land bomber, all of that for a cost of 8 build points. And then finally the Japanese will begin production of a transport. They will also begin training a pilot, and as a concession to their new land war in China, they will be building a militia unit, and that's going to cost the Japanese a grand total of 6. 2, 4, 5. No, I'm sorry, 6. It is 6. For the USSR, the USSR is going to begin production of a 4-engine land bomber, rather expensive, and they will also build a small garrison division for a total of 5 build points. Now on to the democracies. France is simply building a single infantry corps. The Commonwealth is going to begin construction of a battleship herself, as well as a transport. They will be training a pilot, and they will be building a single-engine fighter. All of that is going to cost them a grand total of 8 build points, matching German production this turn. The Chinese will be building an infantry corps or an infantry army for 2, and the United States is going to pull the USS Idaho out of the construction pool, begin the second cycle on that for 3 build points. Now for the Spanish, the Republicans are going to be training a pilot, and again we'll use the Chinese Communist pilot training marker to indicate that, and they are also rebuilding the headquarters unit that was destroyed this turn. That's a grand total of 7 out of their 9 available build points. On the nationalist side, the nationalists are still stuck at 6 build points, but they are going to be building an artillery unit and a single-engine fighter for a total of 6. So that is going to bring us to the end of the May-June 1938 turn. We'll be heading into July-August here, and what looked to be a potentially long action-filled turn actually ended up being much shorter than anticipated, but still a fair amount of action going on, particularly in Spain. I'm sure when we get into July, August, the weather will be even better than it is in May, June, and we'll see if the nationalists in Spain can continue to press the advantage that they gained with their successes this turn. That's going to do it for today. Appreciate you all watching. Take care, and we'll see you next time.